Okay, so going over a CTA responsibilities and to look at, what items to know, what items to highlight on your resume, and what items to like study in the future, right? So in this position, it's saying work closely with the SAM, which is what they refer to as the Site Activation Manager. So that's making sure that everything's getting up and running and you're activating all the sites within the study. And then there's, of course, timelines, right? So you want to watch when things are getting started and kind of like, yeah, the process of if they have certain sites they want to get out first. And a lot of times it also has to overlap with kind of how they're doing their timeline in terms of like which sites have what done, right? There's all these budgets and contracts that have to get approved, right? And so that ties into the activation process. So you have to kind of manage the timeline. So in a sense, if you were doing this role and you were trying to get the CTA job and you had some project management experience, that would help. You'd want to highlight that and talk about managing, items to a project timeline because that's part of the role, right? Is that thinking about how you can utilize previous experience and or getting a project management certificate or doing something that would help support that, right? Okay, so then you're going to support, this is the site activation, right? So amendment release, so just it's talking about further collecting documents. So this CTA position in particular is going to be really heavy on TMF and documents, which is great, right? If you're having a TMF background, this is a good CTA position to apply for. And so talking about all the regulatory documents filed. Oh, here we go. Regulatory green light checklist. That's what I was talking about was the green light package. So that's what we're saying. So to make sure that you're collecting all these documents from the site, and you can do that. Usually the site will email over copies or they put it into a portal. So yeah, managing incoming documents in the Investigator Portal. So this is something that as a TMF specialist, you wouldn't really have visibility into, right? Because you're not really on the clinical operations team to that level. So that's why going over this will help. There's basically a platform for this, what they're calling an Investigator Portal. So it's not TMF, but basically these documents, they're not really getting filed. It's just almost like more like a G drive, but it has to be really secure. So basically the site, the PI and the coordinator together make sure that all the documents for their site gets uploaded into this portal. And let's say if you're thinking about it in a G drive format, right? It's usually a more secure thing than a G drive, but you would have all the different like site names, and then within the site name folders, you would have the particular documents for that site. And that's how, as a CTA, you get these documents, you organize them per site, you make sure that you have everything for the green light packet, you send that to regulatory, and then after all that, you got to make sure that all of this gets filed in the TMF, right? Prior to the site activation. Okay, and then responsible for data entry of specific metrics, which we'll go over a little bit in terms of kind of some trackers that I've had in the past. And then, yeah, so then you can customize like different letters, such as like selection letters, things like that, right? So you might have templates, like maybe I'm trying to think of what I've done before. So for example, when I started at BioMarin, one of my first things I had to do was to try to collect and organize different data from all the different sites. And it was as simple as I sent out an email to all the sites saying, and I had basically like a survey, and they had to say like how many patients they think they had, right? So keep in mind that these people who are, starting a study, the PI, they have patients, but it's not like they have a huge line of patients ready for the study. They have to think about what patients am I currently seeing that might qualify for this? And then do I think that they would be interested, and do I think they would benefit from this? So they have to think about what patients they already have, and then they probably add a few to the idea of, okay, well, I might see new patients within the year. And maybe some of them are related. So they could say, okay, if it's a rare disease, but they're a specialist for it, and they see, I don't know, 100 patients a month, and 10 of them tend to have this, and they can say, okay, well, then, I have a 10% of each month, seeing different patients that would have this. So I'm going to say that I already have 5 patients that I think are good, and then I think I can find a new one like once every month. So maybe I'll say all 8, right? So basically that's what this is part of what a CTA's role is, to help and organize kind of like enrollment trackers, maintain tools and trackers. And part of it is collecting data from the site, right? So what I did in that case is I just got all these emails back, and I created a big Excel where I said, okay, this PI thinks he can do this much. And then we look at what's our total, right? Because you're trying to enroll a certain amount of patients. So let's say you have 160, and you were originally thinking, you as like the CTA and the team, you thought if you enrolled 10 sites and they all provided 16 patients, right? That's 160. But it's usually not like that, where you might have one site that says, okay, I can probably do 20, but then all the other sites, they can only do 3. Well, you're not going to hit 160, right? So that means that then you have to start adding more sites. So it is common within the study to add more sites like during the study. Now, you don't really want to do that because it takes more time, right? You want everything faster in the beginning. So usually you try to get a really good, accurate measurement of what you think people can bring in. And then you probably add a few more sites anyway, so that you can hit those goals quickly. Okay, so that's what we'll go over, some different tools and trackers. And then part of the CTA task is you're also doing like meeting minutes and other administrative tasks. So that I think is important to know, is that like the TMF job is more of a very simple, like, okay, this is what you're doing. And you might have other projects. Like I know Jesse, for example, has taken on more things and he's doing more other projects. But in general, like the initial level of a TMF like processor is you're just kind of processing the documents. And you don't have these other like items going on. Whereas in this case with a CTA, like if something comes up, like new projects are always coming up, a lot of times you'll be delegated to like start it or get it organized or get it ready. So that's when you're kind of doing the CTA tasks of all the kind of any sort of admin aspect kind of falls in your, kind of job responsibilities. And then here they're saying that they would prefer a bachelor's degree and 1 to 4 years. So this is a job where I think if you have a year of TMF experience, you can go ahead and apply, because it's pretty TMF oriented, right? And I think you can definitely say, like, especially if you have, like, if you can really speak to the different regulations, then you have a good shot at this job. So, and this is a remote job. And so this is a pretty good job here. So I kind of wanted to go over some of the different responsibilities and requirements to kind of get an alignment of what this company, which is PRA, is a CRO. And I've actually heard pretty good things about them. And then so you can apply to this job. So this job is going to be more on the CRO side, not the sponsor side, right? So there's CTA positions on both sides. The difference is the CRO is the company that's being hired by the sponsor to get the work done, whereas the sponsor is the company that has the medication, right? So Ultragenyx is a sponsor, PRA is a CRO. Okay, so I'm going to try to jump into quickly some of the different trackers we have, just to give you an idea of how things work. So basically, this is somebody trying to track the different enrolled and screening, and this shows you total available, right? So I kind of wanted to go over this so you kind of understand some of the basic terminology in case you were trying to get a CTA job. This would help you understand, especially take your knowledge from a TMF, which is related more to the documents, to a CTA, which is a little bit more related to the patients, right? And patient tracking. So as we talked about, you might have, your total here in this case is 160, and you have all these different cohorts. Cohorts are different, like breakouts in terms of like different groups. So you talk about like having a control group. This is kind of like that, where you have different sections, and this is what they want to enroll. And then you can have withdrawn too, and we'll talk about that later. But here they have enrolled, but you see it's past tense, right? And who has been enrolled total versus active. So this one is funny because they've had a lot of enrolled, but you can see they have had a lot of withdrawn. So that's why the total available is negative, right? So in this case, they've overshot in general. And this number is not quite accurate, right? Because this one is total available is 0, right? But basically they're showing that you want to have your enrolled and your screening and your available. So you have to monitor this. This is the point I'm trying to make, is that you're trying to monitor how many available sites, right? So, or positions you have in the cohorts, right? So if you're trying to get 160, right? That was our example that we were using earlier. In the beginning of the study, you have 160 available. But as the study progresses, different cohorts or different sites basically are getting filled from the sites, right? And then you have your numbers in terms of what's available. So this might be easier if we just go down to this other group. Here, so these are different. So you have screening, and that's kind of usually like who's in screening. Does anyone want to take a guess what screening means?
Like kind of like filter out.
Yep. So these are the patients that are being checked if they are eligible. So they have not been put into the study yet, but they're like pre-study basically. So and this is the stage where they're doing their ICF, and like if they're good, then they would sign a consent form, and they're all the different items for eligibility are being reviewed and making sure that they're good. And then they get then that's when they would get activated, and then they would get put into like if there's 2 cohorts and you're being randomized, they would be randomized into one of the 2 cohorts, right? And then they would be active. Now, if they leave, they're withdrawn, right? So if they die or if something happens and they decide to go off study for safety, or they go off study because they no longer want to be in the study, like it's just too much work, that's withdrawn. So you want to avoid your withdrawn in general, but even more important, you want to avoid your screen failures. So that's somebody who got screened, they got put in the pre-bucket, and then they didn't work, right? But this is something where if you really train your site well, they won't put them into the screening until they actually know that they're going to be good. You want to avoid screen failures. And then once they basically have passed everything and they're good, then they are consented. And consented is typically what we talked about enrolled. Enrolled and like consented would be very similar. And then and so then here confirmed, this is day 1, basically means that they got like their first dose basically, and then they're in follow-up and then off study. Okay, so that's that. And then let's see what else we have. So this shows you these are the different sites. This is the different site names, and then so screen failure did not progress. And so then okay, lost to follow-up. So basically means that they were not able to follow up with them. Let's see if they did consent, but they never really they received it, but they never really continued. So there's a whole bunch of different reasons why here patient decided not to be in the study, or here the first dose was performed. Let's see what the next one is. If it lets us, okay. So these are all the different studies or all the different patients, and you have to track. So the ICF date, that's when they signed the ICF, And this is, for example, like when you anticipate their first dose. And then here is the actual first dose. Here is their cancer, like which type of cancer they have, and then what cohort they're being assigned to. And so this is looking at eligibility, like which patients they say they think should be in the study. And here is, let's see, so this is medical monitor approval, right? So then you can see how this date should be before, oh, this is anticipated, should be before the actual, right? So the medical monitor should sign off, and then they actually get the dose, right? The 22nd and then the 25th. And so that helps you here, the 4th and the 6th. So like the medical monitor should approve it before they get the actual dose. And then let's go into the different details here. So this is looking at basically all the different patients. This is for a specific cohort, and what their status is, and then basically like tracking what cycle and where they're at. And like if there's an end of treatment date, that means they got off, or they stopped being treated. And the end of study is like they left. And I think this just continues on, but this just gives you an idea of like the different trackers that you would be in charge of managing. Let's see if this one is. So this is a specific project that I worked on, and I call it the Tumor Report. But basically, I thought I'd share this with you because I think it's pretty cool. Basically, we would get the patient data, right? And keep in mind that like, so you don't know the name. All you do know is like just a number that the patient's been assigned to. But let's see. Okay, let's just look at this patient here. It's green. Okay, so this has all of his visits. And then this is a calculator, right? So it's calculating time from baseline based on the dates. And then this is their lesion, right? So this is a cancer study, and we're trying to see if they're going to basically, if the drug is working. If given the drug, do they, does it go down? Okay, good. And so then you have, it goes down to, so it's like, okay, so it started at 37, and then I went to 33. So it's got, now it's a 10% from baseline. This is a baseline. And you can see it's going down. It's going down pretty slowly, right? So 10, and then 20, and then 27, and then, but you can see it kind of stalls out here, 27, 28, like it's just kind of staying there. And then it starts to see a 30% is like a significant withdrawal, like, or a significant reduction. So here it's like a 40%. So that's good. It's showing that as they're taking this medication, their tumor size is going down. Isn't that cool? I think that's a really cool thing to see, that, you know, potentially cancer curing medications here, right? So that part of the excitement of a CTA job is you get a little bit closer to the study in terms of actually seeing the potential benefit to the patient. So this one, you can see this one, it was a 132 is the size, and then it went down to basically nothing, right? And so this is, you're measuring from a scan. And a lot of times you do want to check the numbers. Like this is a pretty big jump, 60% initially. And so if I was, let's say, a medical monitor or something, I might have them be like, okay, like let's pull up the scans and compare. Maybe it wasn't as big as we saw it, or maybe there was a different, you know, the jump was smaller, right? But this is really cool stuff in the sense that you're watching the cancer get smaller. And so here's another one too, where they're basically, it's getting from 100 to then down to 5. And this is the size of the tumor. And you can see it didn't work for everybody, right? This, like, if naturally your tumor is going to get larger, right? So this person, the drug had no effect, and it kind of, or maybe it did a little bit, but it went up first, and then all we had was a drop from 36 to 33, but then they left the study. So yeah, so this is just like a different tracker that I use to kind of see the benefit of what was going on with the patients. And I think that's good. I think that gives you an idea of what we've been looking at in terms of knowing what the CTA role is, and kind of some different potential trackers or things to do. that are not the TMF, right? A lot of the CTA role will be related to the TMF, which is what we see here. But in addition to that, it can be more. So, and then a quick note, I know we're about to end here, but basically if you think about it, the positions and the pays vary, right? So your TMF pay is going to be a little lower usually than CTA, but they're both fairly similar to an entry level. Like if you have TMF can be a little bit more entry level, and then you can kind of graduate into a CTA position. Or some people start directly with a CTA position, which was my case. And basically, so that's why it says down here, like just like 1 to 4 years of relevant work experience. So if you're having trouble getting a TMF job, one other option is the route that I took is I actually was, I did like a clinical, you can do like a clinical project associate, or I did a clinical like clinical operations, like administrative associate, right? So doing more of the administrative work, but it gives you experience within the field, right? So that is a potential route you can do. So having, even just having basic admin skills or a business job can help you, because you can still try to say like, well, it's actually relevant work experience, right? While, for example, with Ken, if you're doing different, like more like facilities coordinator job, but you can talk about how it works with the timelines, and you can talk about how you know how to do administrative tasks, and let's say, you know how to do meetings and teleconferences and things like that, and you know how to collect documents. Like you can try to utilize your current work experience to say that actually it is relevant. So that's kind of part of what you're doing as you're crafting your resume, is you're trying to highlight more so the skills versus just the years in actual like CTA experience. And so pay wise, it matters where you are and stuff like that, but usually it's almost like 30 to 50 would be for a TMF role. Usually more on like the, let's say the 30 side. And then as you progress and you have more experience, you might get closer to the 50. And then for a CTA, I think it would start more so in the like the 40 to 50 range. And this is dollars per hour, and it can then continue, right? So I would say that a lot of entry level CTA jobs within the Bay Area might start at 60, right? Just because it's the Bay Area, it's a little bit more expensive. And then you might have, as you progress, then you get a little, as an experienced CTA or a senior CTA, you might be hitting, like for sure that 60 to 70 range. And then that's when you're kind of getting into like a junior CTM role. And then for myself, I'm making 88 right now as a CTM, and that gives you an idea of like what you can make. And then I know people who are like senior CTMs, but like very senior, like 10 to 15 years as a CTM, and you're getting like 160 an hour, right? And that's a lot. And so that gives you an idea that yes, maybe starting off at 30 an hour is not amazing, but it has a large trajectory that you can go, which is kind of rare in jobs, right? I see that's like, for example, if you're a physician, you do years and years of schooling and you pay lots of money for your education, but then you come out and you might be hitting that more like that 160 range, right? Whereas here you can be working and making money as you do it, and you don't particularly have to have certain degrees, like having a medical or having a like a bachelor's in science helps, but usually they just require a bachelor's. And then as you progress, you can get more, like let's say Jesse has an MBA, and like I'll probably want to do an MBA soon too. That just helps you progress and get closer to that like 160 range. So yeah, overall, I think clinical research is a wonderful field. I think it's very interesting, and it has some of the largest like trajectory of potential pay, with having kind of a variety of requirements. You don't have to have an MD. It's like helpful to have a PhD, or to have like, you can have like an MBA or other things like that, but you don't have to, right? I know like for example, a very good senior CTM who's at Genentech right now, and she has like an art degree. She's like an art history major, right? You don't have to have, it's more, there's so many different variety of skills that are needed. Like what she's doing right now has to do a lot with writing, right? And so there's a variety of skills needed, and so there's lots of different ways to fit into all these different jobs that are related to clinical research. So yeah, hopefully that gives you a little insight on the CTA, and if you want to get help looking into jobs, I can definitely help look, and that's what we try to do to help you here at Power of Work. Thanks, guys. Hope you have a great day.
Thank you so much, Irene. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
See you, Jesse.
Okay.